whole global food system is relying on four grains: rice, wheat, soy, and corn. You'd be surprised, Noah, the amount of crops that have disappeared in the past 50 years only. There are crops from my country, from my continent, that are not integrated in the food system, and fonio is a perfect example. As a chef, that's most important. It's a grain that's delicious. It's delicate. It's very versatile. You can do so many things cooking with fonio. And the most important that you guys would like, it cooks in 5 minutes.
From Morning Brew, this is Business Casual, where we chat with people you know and some you may not know yet, and share stories that might surprise you about the trends in tech shaping business and your life right now. I'm your host, Nora Ali. Now let's get down to business.
Business Casual.
We know that marketing undoubtedly impacts what we choose to eat. I used to ask my parents to buy the cool new cereal, probably something like French Toast Crunch or Oreo O's as a kid, because I saw a fun TV commercial that was marketed to people like me, an 8-year-old who liked sugar-hyped cartoon mascots. And most of those cereals and other common food products were composed of 4 main grains: rice, wheat, corn, and soy. One huge contributing factor to those 4 being our main grains in the US is the strategic work of brands and marketing agencies that very intentionally made it happen. Our guest today, Senegalese chef and entrepreneur Pierre Thiam, is on a mission to make an ancient grain called fonio the next big thing. Through better marketing, education and storytelling via his 3 cookbooks. His latest one is called The Fonio Cookbook, an ancient grain rediscovered. And also by making yummy food with fonio in places like his New York restaurant, Turanga, where he's the executive chef and co-founder. He built his company, Yolele, in 2017 with the intention of creating economic opportunities for farmers who grow grains like fonio, and his success could have a huge impact on African countries by alleviating poverty and hunger for millions of people. One of the marketing challenges around fonio, Pierre told us, has been to reverse the colonial mentality around it. This idea that fonio is somehow inferior because it's not a European or American product. But it's nutritious, tastes a little like couscous, is environmentally friendly, and takes 5 minutes to make. As Pierre calls it, it's a miracle grain, which was cultivated in Africa for thousands of years before colonization. Pierre shared a lot of surprising tips for anyone looking to distinguish their brand in a competitive space and how to introduce products to new, unfamiliar markets. He also highlighted the importance of having a bigger mission beyond the products you're selling. Pierre is lovable and passionate, and it really came through in our conversation. And that convo is next after the break. Today's episode of Business Casual is sponsored by Real Vision. Investment advice can feel a bit fickle. The advice that makes sense today might not be what you want or need to hear tomorrow. But the new Real Investing course from Real Vision aims to change that with timeless investing principles from the world's best investors. The Real Investing course will give you the tools and foundation you need to be a smarter, more confident investor today, tomorrow, and always. Now that's something we can get behind. You'll learn how to think like a seasoned investor and understand how they execute trades and manage positions, and how you can tailor those investing strategies to make them your own. Join this financial education revolution today and get access to the Real Investing course at realvision.com/education. So I do want to start with a little bit of an icebreaker. Obviously, the restaurant business has changed so much in just the last few years with the increased rise of delivery and health and safety concerns in restaurants. So we want to know, what is something you wish people knew about what it's like to work in a restaurant and in the restaurant industry, something that you wish customers would be more cognizant of?
This year, this pandemic's been truly disrupting. And a lot of things that people didn't know is now known. I wish they had known it before. I wish they had known that many of the restaurant workers are essential workers. It turns out we are essential, and that's why our industry was, trying to stay afloat. It was very, very difficult. As per my restaurant, we decided not to close down our doors, and we had to be very flexible in doing so. The main reason why we wanted to stay open is, for me personally, my team in the kitchen. I have employees that work with me for over 2 decades now. My very first restaurant, the same people that work with me, and we're depending on that, because we work in an industry where There's no safety net. People are getting paid on a weekly basis, and this is how we plan it. And this is unfortunately the situation of this system. And now these people are finding themselves without any source of income and completely like at the mercy of of a pandemic. So that was very, very difficult for us to realize it. We kind of knew it, but we were not expecting a pandemic. And now I wish everyone knew that. I wish people were like more conscious on how we treat essential workers. And food system is something that's quite important. So yeah, I think it's a big realization.
Yeah, yeah, and we've seen a lot of, turnover, people leaving the services industry because the pandemic highlighted just how difficult it is to work in an industry like food. You said that you've worked with, some of your employees who have been with you for over 2 decades. That's incredible. Why do you think they're so loyal to you as a boss, as someone they want to work with?
Well, I like to believe that as fair as possible to them. I try to treat them with respect. I have very much respect for them. This is my approach to cooking. First, the kind of cuisine that I present, my mission in cooking is to really bring the food culture of West Africa, which was something that's quite unique in the New York world. So the team that worked with me, they recognize themselves in this mission, and that's a unique place that they find themselves into. And so that really opened opportunities for many of them. They were able to explore and to connect with their culture. My team, those people I'm thinking about, they're coming from different backgrounds, mostly from West Africa, others from other parts of the world too, but who are also interested in this culture. So this is a unique place. That's one of the reasons why they stuck to it. And I tried to be fair in remunerating, and that was something that also we were very competitive in the way we were treating our employees. That's also something that is considerable. And I mean, the rest is, I try to be as human and friendly. I'm very friendly. I'm not the type of chef that screams and throw knives and throw pots on the table. That's not me at all. So yeah. So that makes it easier, I guess.
Yeah, you have to be human, treat your workers well, pay them fairly. And to your point, there's a broader mission that you have. It's not just about making good food. And I do want to get to that mission. So you talk a lot about this grain called fonio. And from my perspective as a regular consumer, it feels like the grain industry is just dominated by rice, corn, and wheat. I had never heard of fonio before. But what is it exactly? And why do you describe it as sort of a miracle grain?
Well, it's a miracle grain in so many ways. It's the oldest cultivated grain in Africa. So what is fonio? Fonio is a grain. It's a gluten-free grain. It's an ancient grain. It's very, very nutritious. And it's great for the environment. It's a grain that grows in poor soil and has a way to regenerate the soil because it has deep roots that add nutrients to the soil. So in addition to being great for the environment, fonio is also a nutrition powerhouse. It's really nutritious. It's rich in fiber. It's rich in amino acids. Two of them in particular called cysteine and methionine. And those ones are deficient in most of the major grains, rice, wheat, all of those usual suspects. Fonio has it in abundance. So it's a grain that really we need to support. Like many other grains, it's unfortunate, like you just mentioned, that the whole global food system is relying on 4 grains, the ones you mentioned, rice, wheat, soy, and corn. But there are thousands of other grains and plant food that we are ignoring. We didn't integrate them in our food system. So for me, as a chef from West Africa, I saw this as an opportunity. There are crops from my country, from my continent, that are not integrated in the food system, and they need to be integrated for many reasons. First, to save biodiversity, because when we don't consume, when there's not a market for these crops, they disappear. You'd be surprised, Noah, the amount of crops that have disappeared in the past 50 years only. The past 50 years, there's something like 60% of the biodiversity has disappeared. And we're talking about climate change. We're talking about hunger, and those issues can only be tackled. The solution to those problems is by integrating those underutilized crops like fonio. And fonio is a perfect example. It's resilient. It grows in an area that's dry. It's the Sahel, the south of the Sahara Desert. So it's really a grain that's like that mitigates the advance of the desert because it restores that soil. And it's also, as a chef, that's most important. It's a grain that's delicious. It's delicate. It's very versatile. You can do so many things cooking with fonio. And the most important that you guys would like, it cooks in 5 minutes. It's really the fascinating thing about fonio.
How did you know? That is very important to me. But it's not just about sort of the maintaining biodiversity and the health and climate benefits even of fonio. It's also the livelihoods of those who are cultivating the grain as well. Can you share a little insight on the reality of life in that Sahel region of Africa that you mentioned and how fonio cultivation could actually help to change it if there was more demand for the grain?
Well, let me tell you one thing. Fonio in Senegal, in the country I'm from, grows in a region called Kédougou. And Kédougou is considered to be the poorest region of Senegal. So that's the thing. The reality is when you go to Kédougou, you don't even see any more youth. The young men in particular have left Kédougou because there's no opportunities. They're going out. You may have or may not have heard of this odyssey of young Africans who are traveling to Europe, trying to make it to Europe for opportunities of work. So those people, if a grain like fonio becomes a world-class crop, they have opportunities, they have employment, and that's all they need. They're young and able, but they don't have opportunities because these crops don't have access to market. So I figured, as a Senegalese chef based in New York who knows what fonio is, if I was able to figure out a path from fonio to the global market, that would change the situation. That would bring economic opportunities. That would bring jobs. That would just even people taking pride in a product that's very significant as part of their inheritance. So there's so much that comes up with it is at stake. And that's not only for the locals, which are the ultimate beneficiaries, which should be the ultimate beneficiaries because that's their heritage crop, but even for the consumers, because it's important for us to have a diet that's diverse. It's so important for even for our health. Many of the chronic diseases that you've seen coming up in the past 50, 100 years, they're directly connected to our diet. And you see more and more of those because we don't diversify our diet. And crops like fonio are just helping for that. So not only fonio scores low on the glycemic index, so we talk about diabetes. The people suffering of type of diabetes are looking for these kind of products, but they don't have access to it. So bringing a market for fonio is checking so many different boxes, but most importantly, you're right, bringing economic opportunity in the poorest regions of the world, which is rural West Africa.
So Pierre, you're talking about how there's limited access to fonio as it stands now. And one issue that you brought up in your TED Talk, which I found was so interesting, you said there's this colonial mentality that what comes from the West is best, and people see fonio as, quote, simply country people's food. Can you expand on the perception of fonio and how that's contributing to limiting the spread of this so-called miracle grain?
Well, I can take you through a little bit of historical background. Senegal is a country that was colonized by the French, right? And as you know, colonization was a business move. It was like about supporting the economy of the colonizers through their businesses, through their enterprises, and the agricultural politics of France at the time was to make sure our farmers in Senegal grow crops that are in demand for the French economy. And peanuts happened to be that crop at the time. Peanut oil was very much prized; it still is. But so it became the cash crop. So the French farmers supported the economy of peanut in Senegal, the agriculture of peanut in Senegal, and they started importing broken rice from the other part of the French colonial empire, which was Indochina, Vietnam, and all that was coming, the broken rice, which was leftover rice, from the debris from the rice being processed in Vietnam. They were sending it to Senegal, and that became the rice that Senegalese were consuming, which is a substandard rice. But even today, like 60 years after independence, we are still importing that rice. We are still depending on that rice. This is the rice that we use in our national dish. In the meantime, we have ignored our traditional crops like fonio, like millet, even like our own rice. Even have a rice culture in the South, but we haven't developed a value chain for those crops just because of the system that was established by the French colonial. And even further, right? The French colonial started bringing to Senegal wheat, because we don't grow wheat in Senegal, but they grow wheat flour, and they brought a certain aspect of the French culture, which is a symbolic baguette bread. The baguette bread is such a big part of Senegalese culture now. Every single day, every Senegalese household has baguette bread for breakfast or for dinner. It's there. Every street corner of Dakar, you'll see the baguette bread kiosk. So we don't grow wheat. So we have like, and we now start exporting wheat to satisfy that demand, and we are not growing our own crops because also part of that mentality. It's a branding thing. The wheat was branded, baguette was branded, and we didn't brand our crops like fonio. And we started to think of whatever was coming from the French, whatever was coming from the West is best. Like I said, because the French were bringing their products, that we were branding it properly, and we were looking down at our own products, which were far more superior in terms of nutrition, and they were more adapted to our system, our region, our environment. But we looked down at them because the French didn't promote them, and we didn't think of promoting them after independence. So even today, you don't see fonio products in Dakar, the big cities of Senegal. And to me, the challenge was to reverse that by making fonio attractive and turning it into a brand. And that's why Yolele came to be. Yolele is the brand that we are promoting as a platform for promoting those underutilized African crops. And promoting it in a city like New York has a double impact, because New York is really a leading in terms of culture. If it makes it in New York, like Sinatra say, you can make it in New York. So if you make it for you in New York, which we did, we started in New York, and now we are distributed across the U.S. and now in Africa, it's being people are looking at fonio now in Senegal. The demand is like, hey, can we have your Lele products? So that's great. It's working, and that was the vision, and that's very important to see that branding is a big part of it, and it's time that we start decolonizing our mentality in Africa and everywhere in the world, really, but in Africa and Senegal in particular. That colonial mentality that made us look down at our own product is something that's fonio can reverse, because fonio is before colonization. It's 5,000 years. It's like it's an important crop symbolically.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Where you've made fonio something that's more known, getting more popular in New York, and the popularity in New York is what's getting people in Africa to actually pay attention now. Was that the plan all along? That's incredible foresight. How did you know that was the way to go?
Well, because I've been paying attention in other things that came from this part of the world, and that became very popular in my part of the world. Like everything that's branded, culturally, music, food, products, it all came here, and it became hugely popular in Senegal, in Africa, and elsewhere. That's just the way the system is, and branding is really what it is, and so New Yorkers, what comes from the West is best, like I said, right? So New York is like the ultimate West, I guess. So this thing that actually really came from us, but is now coming back through New York, it becomes best. So it was a strategy, I guess.
And in terms of branding, there's obviously big corporations that have a big impact on what we consume. One of those is Amazon, which owns Whole Foods, of course. So walk me through how you got Amazon and Whole Foods to pay attention to fonio. How did you land that first distribution deal with them?
Well, there was elements of luck. There was elements of timing. Amazon, I mean, Whole Foods were opening a store in Harlem. I have a restaurant in Harlem, Teranga,
Hmm.
and Whole Foods were opening a store in Harlem, which happened to be a community of West Africans, and they have this approach of like moving into a community and integrating some of the community's products to belong, right? That's like a Whole Foods approach. So we came to them. My business partner, Philippe Tevro, who's also a veteran in the food industry, um, had a connection there. We approached Whole Foods and said, "Hey, we have this product that West African community would connect with," and that's really how it started. And the first thing was, obviously we knew that when you come to one Whole Foods, you have to make sure your product moves. Otherwise, they go off the shelf quickly. I mean, Whole Foods is like just like that. So we had to do tastings. We had to do cooking demo. I personally would go and do cooking demos and having people taste the food too. Like, hey, this fonio, the name sounds funny at first for you, but now taste it. And then they taste it. And every time we would do tasting, the products would fly off the shelf.
Wow.
And every time. And Whole Foods noticed it, obviously. We became actually the leaders in our category. In the grain categories, the fonio was leading for this unknown grain. It was quite amazing. So next step was for Whole Foods invited us to do another store downtown this time, and it still started to sell. And then Midtown and Brooklyn and all that, and then the whole New York, and then northeastern region, and then the whole country. And between that and today, we have added even more products. We have Fonio Pilafs now that are all inspired by West African traditional cuisine. We have the Jollof Pilafs, we have the Dawa Dawa, which is a fermented locust bean. We have the Yassa, which is a dish I'm really proud of because it's from the south of Senegal. It has onions and lime and chili in it. So there's all those products that came, and even more exciting now, we entered the snack category. We have Fonio chips now, which are even more exciting because those people who are not going to cook, even though it cooks in 5 minutes, they can go and grab the chips and snack on it because everyone loves a snack. And our chips are quite amazing. And they're all gluten free, like I mentioned. They're very, they're very flavorful. We have the sea salt. And I'm not sure. Have you tried the chips, Nora?
I
Sure.
haven't. I'm waiting for someone to send me some. I'll go pick them up at
I'm
Whole
going.
Foods.
No. I'll send them to you. Make sure you get them definitely.
The gluten-free part of it is appealing to me because I try to avoid gluten, and it's become so much more common now. You go out to restaurants, they have gluten-free labels, they have gluten-free sections. How much has maybe changing dietary needs or people realizing their dietary needs, how much has that sort of changed people's appetite for fonio? And is that something that people are looking for, is that gluten-free aspect of it?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that definitely was one of the main reasons why we started with Fonio. Fonio was checking all the boxes, including gluten free. One was my inspiration was quinoa. I was in New York as quinoa was entering, and as quinoa was making its way, this obscure grain from Latin America, the Andes, and ancient grain too. But it was the gluten free aspect of quinoa that people were like, "Wow, this is interesting." And so to me, it really was kind of like my north star. I knew what I wanted to avoid. I didn't want to fall into the pitfalls, the same problems that quinoa did have with with the indigenous farmers who didn't get as much as I could have. So I used that as a path, what to avoid and what not to avoid. But quinoa was the way. If quinoa was able to make it, fonio can make it. And we have to talk about this, its nutritional aspect and the gluten-free aspect, because there's a growing demand for gluten-free products. So Fonio was that. It was checking all the boxes. But Yolele wasn't a Fonio company to begin with. Fonio is our star ingredient, but Yolele is actually a company that promotes African food products and African food culture. So we have other products that are coming up that are also going to be introduced to the market, like Bambara groundnuts, for instance, which is a bean that was traditionally grown in rotation with fonio. See, we want to promote this traditional way of doing agriculture. We want to stay away from monoculture. So if we promote fonio only, the farmers are going to grow only fonio, like they were growing only peanuts when the French imposed it to them. And like it's been happening here in big farms, it's like, so that's the problem. And when you talk about climate change, a lot of the challenges are caused by monoculture, because then you have to put some chemicals in the soil to grow it regardless of the season. You have to just get water, which is very difficult now because water is a challenge. So all of that is something we wanted to avoid. We want to stick with fonio, which is a rain-fed kind of agriculture, rain-fed crop. And then when the season of fonio is gone, we want to go to Bambara groundnuts. Bambara groundnuts is a very nutritious bean. It tastes like peanuts, but it doesn't have the allergens of peanuts. And so I think this is it's absolutely amazing, and you love it too.
I have a nut allergy. I have a nut allergy, so I'm gonna have to check
there we
it
go.
out. That's amazing.
There we go. There we go. See, we're coming for you.
Yeah, Pierre, I think sometimes we have to be reminded how much marketing impacts our daily lives, because you market a certain grain, that's the one people demand, that impacts the level of production and agriculture around the world, and it all stems from what's being marketed to people. So I love that you're being intentional about the products you're marketing. But what happens when you get outside of places like New York or the West Coast, where we're, I think, traditionally, maybe stereotypically, a little bit more open to trying foods from other cultures from around the globe? How do you spread that message, that awareness to more parts of the US, more parts of the world even, where they might not have the open eyes maybe that I sound like a New York centric person right now. I do live in New York. I love New York. But to those who might not be as open to trying new things, how do you open their eyes?
Well, we have several tools. One is because we're a small company, we have very little means, so we're using social media a lot. We have a social media presence. We have in our team a dynamic social media person who gets us now on TikTok and Instagram and all those things. But we also have the support, and very organically support of influencers who just love the products, and those influencers come from different backgrounds. Some are, nutrition conscious or diet conscious, who want to promote the gluten-free aspect, for instance. There's a strong community there, and those guys are promoting fonio and tagging us all along. And we also, I personally, as a chef, I have been fortunate to be able to write cookbooks. So my last cookbook was called the Fonio Cookbook. I dedicated it to the whole journey of fonio. And it's been great to see this book being distributed, to see great chefs like Massimo Bottura writing the introduction to the book. So those guys they're not connected to the African culture, but they connect to the ingredient. And that's what the beautiful thing about food, it transcends borders. So outside of New York and Los Angeles, you have people in the Midwest who are also looking for conscious consumers, who are looking for that kind of connection, and we're reaching out to them through those different networks that we have access to, and that's beautiful. That's really beautiful.
It really is. We're going to take another quick break. More with Pierre when we return. Today's Business Casual episode is brought to you by Wealthfront. In today's financial climate, we're all looking to save some money any way we can, right? And what's even better than saving money? Free money. So if you're keeping cash anywhere that isn't paying you a high interest rate, listen up. Wealthfront is a saving and investing app that can help you earn more on your money and build wealth for your future. The Wealthfront Cash Account gives everyone a 1.4% APY interest rate, which is a whopping 20 times more than what traditional banks pay. There are already nearly 500,000 people using Wealthfront to save more, earn more, and build long-term wealth. So why wait? Earn 1.4% on your cash today. And if you start now, you'll get a free $50 bonus with a $500 deposit. Visit wealthfront.com/casual to get started. That's wealthfront.com/casual. This no-brainer good news has been a paid endorsement from Wealthfront. Pierre, you brought up your restaurant Teranga. And by the way, you mentioned your social media team. The Instagram page for Teranga is absolutely beautiful. Beautiful photography. I encourage everyone to check it out. But what was your original plan for the restaurant? Do you have plans to expand, or is this just one small piece of the larger Pierre portfolio?
No, Teranga was never a small piece. Teranga has plans to expand. Actually, we have two Terangas as we stand. We have one Harlem, 110, and one in Midtown, 53rd and Lexington. And the goal with Teranga was to be actually to scale into multiple locations. New York again was the place to begin such a dream, like Yolele, like the fonio. And we thought, once you have a few locations in New York, then you have a proof of concept, and then you can start raising funds and looking for ways to expand. We hope to open Teranga in other parts of the country and in Africa, actually. And this is the why I designed Teranga this way. Teranga is designed in a way that it's less intimidating. Before Teranga, I had two other restaurants, Grand Dakar and Yolele, and called Yolele as well, differently, but this was a restaurant. And those restaurants were sit-down restaurants. You would come and you would get a menu and you'd sit down. It was obviously like an African restaurant, and that was sometimes a challenge for some of the consumers, because some people just when they're not familiar, when they're lost, they're afraid to enter. And Africa itself can be very scary for many people, and because again, that same mindset that made us think of what comes from our own place is to be ignored. It's the same mindset. The people here too were somewhat programmed to be afraid of Africa. The history of this country and Africa is kind of it's a difficult one. So you have a lot of people who had this apprehension, and Teranga was designed so that those people, when they enter Teranga, they have the choice. It's not like you are imposed on a dish and you have it, and then all your fears are coming to stop you. But now you have a choice. You come and you see your board and you say, this is what I want in my plate. I pick this grain, I pick this sauce, I pick this protein, I pick this green, and you make your own bowl. But it's all everything you're making is
Wow.
you are part of it, and that's just what made everything different. If you got a chance to go to Teranga, or if you saw the reviews that we had from Teranga from all across, I mean, all mainstream media have been praising Teranga, but it's because that approach was different than the traditional restaurant. People actually are in control. They come, they make and then they eat, and they're like, wow, these are and it's great flavors, it's light, and it just through food. The message is so clear, and it dispels all the myths, and then people come back and they bring their friends. And you enter Teranga, especially before the pandemic, when all the tables were accessible. You have the world, people from so many diverse backgrounds, from
Yeah.
Asia, to Caucasians, blacks, and it's just what food does, and only food can do it in this way. So really, and I love that aspect.
I
and,
love
and,
that.
and we still
Yeah.
plan on expanding.
Great. Well, this notion
you.
of introducing people to new food, but giving them control over their selections and doing it piece by piece, item by item, that's so wonderful. It makes it more approachable. So you do say on your website, Pierre, our perception of ourselves starts with the food we eat. That's very poetic. I love it. What does that mean to you? How does this notion of our perception of ourselves tie in to your businesses overall?
Well, for me personally, that all began with when I realized that, was working in the food business in New York in the early '90s, late '80s, early '90s. That's when I really started working in the food world. And New York was like the food capital of the world at the time, and that world, I wasn't part of it. It was missing Africa, and I felt like, wow. First of all, Africa has so much to offer, particularly where I came from, and I had much respect for the food that I was eating here in New York, but I knew that my food had this place too. So and I wanted to belong. I wanted to also share, to bring what was missing to this food capital of the world, to make it really a food capital of the world. And we forget that food is really where it began. The civilization, some people say, begin with cooking. When you start cooking, and then you invite people around, and then that's like the sharing. That's where civilization began, and one can definitely argue that a man mastered fire in Africa. So that's a first step to cooking. It's a necessary first step to cooking. So from that moment, and believing that we have started our first cooking moments in that continent, and then from that moment we started, not only having a better way of controlling the crops, agriculture, and all of those things, and mastering the grains. all of those things. So by that, I want to say that when you look at a plate today, that plate is telling you a story. And that story is really the story of your people, the story of the ancestors who mastered those grains, who brought those methods of cooking. And today you're just continuing that story. Me as a chef, I'm continuing the story when I serve it at my restaurant. This is a way for me to tell this story, to share what I really have taken from my ancestors. I'm really not, I cannot even take the credits for it. I may be taking a creative approach of presenting it, but it's really just getting without the grains, without the method of cooking them, without the all of that. There's no me, there's no story. So yes, it's a long way to answer your
Yeah,
question,
yeah,
but
no,
it really is
I love it.
important that to know that we are storytellers. That's what chefs are today, and that's what chefs have always been.
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. Food is everything to me. For my family and myself culturally, I'm Bangladeshi, and we tell stories through our food, and we have traditions we've passed down for generations. So that resonates with me for sure, Pierre. Okay, before we let you go, we do have a couple of bonus questions, and the first segment is called Shoot Your Shot. So, Pierre, I want to know, what is your moonshot idea? This is your wildest ambition, your biggest dream. It could be personal, it could be business related. This is your chance to shoot your shot. So go for it.
Oh, okay. Shut. So, yeah, I like I said, this mission began with me wanting to put Africa in its place in the food table of the world, and this is my shot. Really, I want to see Yolele products to continue to grow in this direction, including underutilized African crops into the food system, and in doing so, really bring economic opportunities, support to become really a path, a model of development for rural Africa. And that's what I see as my moonshot. I'd love to see our products in all the supermarkets around the world and being in demand, and people really connecting with that, finding it to be not only nourishing for their soul, for their body, because that's what food is about, and that's really changing the food system, because this food system that imposed upon us only four crops, and my moonshot is to see a food system that brings all these other crops that nature has offered to us. And they could be not specifically from Africa. This is for your latest mission, but they are also Bangladeshi crops. There are also Indian crops. There are also Qatari crops. Yes, and they need to come out. If they do not come out, they disappear. That's what we need to realize. So this model that Yolele is presenting, it should be duplicated. There should be a Yolele with a different name from Bangladeshi food and elsewhere. It shouldn't be, concentrated. And that's what the problem we have is concentrated in like the hands of four big corporations. They're the ones who are controlling this food system. And today we're seeing the problem with that, Ukraine war, and we don't have wheat anymore. And it's like, oh, wow, why is the world depending on one region of the world there are thousands of other crops. Let's bring them to the market. So that's my moonshot, is to see all of that, and to see teranga restaurants around in all the big cities of the world. That's
Terangas everywhere, yoleles around the world. It's about climate, it's about biodiversity, it's about economic opportunity, it's about so much more than food. That's a great moonshot.
Absolutely.
Here. Okay, final question for you. What is the best thing you saw this week? It could be an article, a TikTok, an episode of a TV show, a food item in your restaurant, just something that brought you joy this week.
It's not TikTok for sure, but I can answer without a doubt. This week I was in Honolulu. I just returned yesterday from Honolulu, and I went to visit this place called Shangri-La. And Shangri-La is an amazing place that most people haven't heard of. It's the Museum of Islamic Art. And it's been established by someone named Doris Duke. At some point, she was the richest woman in the world. And she traveled the world and she fell in love with this culture. and she collected the most amazing collection of around the Islamic world. I mean, from Spain, ancient Spain, the Moors to like, the Qatari, Iraq, Persian. It's just stunning. I mean, stunning. And I didn't know. I knew about it, and I tried to go visit whenever I was visiting Hawaii, which I go often because my wife has family there. But it was closed during the pandemic, and this time finally I got to visit it, and I was shocked. I mean, it was like there was a little bit of because it's a stunning house right by the water, so there is a little bit of the how do you call it, that Indian amazing architecture with reflecting waters and the pillars, and you have these pools, and then you have these like beautiful marble. It's carved. The ceilings are carved out of wood from Morocco. I mean, the details on this house Shangri-La is really what made my week. I mean, that's stunning. I
Amazing.
mean, that's the most beautiful thing I've seen this week. Yeah.
It's the Shangri-La Museum of Islamic Art, Culture, and Design in Honolulu. Love that. Great recommendation for those of our listeners who will be traveling there soon.
Okay. Check
Awesome.
it out. Check
Yes.
it out.
I can see you're still moved by it, even talking about it now. Well, Pierre, we will leave things there.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you so much for joining Business Casual. I learned so much and really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks.
The pleasure was mine. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, it's time for our favorite segment. We're going to play another round of a game that we are calling, for now, Brew's Tweets, featuring our very own super duper producer, Bella Hutchins. You know you love her. You know you missed her. Hello, Bella.
Hey guys, hello. Happy
You
to be
ended
here.
you ended the last time we played this game, you ended it by saying, I can't wait for this to be over. So obviously we had to bring you back because we loved it so much.
Feeling
Okay,
blessed.
great. Me too. Blessed that you're here. So the concept is simple. As a reminder, we choose a question that was posed by Morning Brew's main Twitter account, and we discuss the answers, the comments that all of our lovely listeners and audience have submitted. Okay, so the tweet question is, what's been your worst Airbnb experience? Okay, I'm sure the responses were good. Here are the top 3 responses as curated by our production team. Bella and I have not seen them until now. So here we go. First one, we're clicking it. Would you like to read this one, Bella?
I will read this one. Okay. Oh God. Okay. Checked in. An hour later, a tree fell on our car and the roof of our house. We had to leave in the middle of the night in a blizzard with a broken windshield and no mirror, and our hood crunched in. Owners still wanted to charge us, and Airbnb insurance declined to pay for anything.
That is terrible.
That is terrible.
So
Oh my
Airbnb insurance, yeah, because that's probably because they don't have specific terms for if a tree falls on your car
Yeah.
near the property. It
Very
probably only,
specific instance.
yeah, it probably only covers things that happen in the house or like in the
Yeah.
property.
Jeez.
That's really bad. This is from a person named Matt. Thank you, Matt, for submitting that. We agree that it's horrible.
Sorry
Okay.
for you, Matt.
Yeah, we're sorry for you, Matt. Okay, next one. Checked into a nice guest house on a posh property in Sebastopol, California. Is that a place? Sebastopol, California. The next morning, when I moved the coffee maker, thousands of ants poured out from a hole in the wall. The owner first accused us of bringing them in our suitcase, and then
What?
said we left out food and attracted them. Oh my gosh, that to me is worse than the first one because I cannot handle little creepy crawly bugs anywhere. What do you
Same.
think?
I think that's way worse. I think that's way
Yeah.
worse. I also had an instance once with cockroaches in one of my Airbnbs.
No. What'd you do?
And so, well, it was my graduation from college weekend, and so my friends and I were just like, let's just roll with the punches
Uh-huh.
and accept the roaches.
Oh no. You're not afraid they're gonna like crawl on your face when you're sleeping?
We were afraid, but there was nothing to be
Yeah.
done.
Oh my gosh, that's horrid. You know, the worst
Horrid.
part of both of these is that like the owners and or Airbnb don't help to rectify the situation. It's one
Yeah,
thing
they're
to
just like,
have
that sucks for you.
yeah, it's one thing to have a bad situation and like your trip's ruined, but at the very least, the owner, the property renter, or Airbnb could do something about it. Well, those are both bad. And that was from someone named Jerry. Geri. Jerry. Sorry, Jerry. Okay, last one. Would you like to read this one, Bella?
Oh, this is coming from a host.
Oh.
As a host, someone left the fridge 100% full, bags of trash and loose trash everywhere, shoes, clothing, stuff in the shower and medicine cabinet, little beads, and other arts and crafts materials around the living room.
I mean,
Wow.
That's pretty bad, but I think the other two are worse.
I think the other two are worse too.
Beads.
And that's kind of what, yeah, beads. What?
What?
And that kind of goes with like what we were saying earlier, which is that an Airbnb is just a hotel with chores, because you could do that at a hotel and nothing would happen.
Totally.
Like, you don't have to clean up after yourself.
The list of things that you have to do when exiting an Airbnb is sometimes really insane.
Really insane.
And then on top of that, you have to pay a cleaning fee on top of your booking fee. So you're paying for a cleaner. But listen, I get it. People are opening up their homes to strangers. You don't want them to leave it like a disaster zone. So I get it. But and for this reason, I mostly prefer hotels to Airbnbs, if I'm going to be honest. I like being able to do whatever I want, and the luxury feel of hotel. I sound like such a... I can't say the word I'm thinking, but like, you know.
I agree though. I think Airbnbs they only work for when you're on a really big trip.
Yes.
With people.
With
and it's like, it's not fun
friends.
to be in a hotel and you're separated and all of that. But like when you wake up on a trip and you're like hungover, and then it's like, okay, wash all the sheets and dry them and make all the beds and like swap the floors. It's like, what?
Yeah. Was the cockroach incident your worst incident?
The cockroach incident, okay, well, this one incident, all my friends got a house when we graduated from college, and so there were roaches at the end of the weekend, which was really gross, but also could have been our fault. But the really bad part of it was that on the first night we all came home and we were eating snacks in the kitchen, and there was a like really long light fixture at the top of the ceiling, and while we were all in the room, it came out of the ceiling and was dangling like by a thread over all of our heads, and we were all like, if that had like fallen one more inch, we would all like die.
Oh no.
So it was really scary, and so we told the people, and they said they were going to come fix it, but they didn't, so we just like weren't able to go into the kitchen for the rest of the time.
Oh my gosh.
So that was
Oh my
terrible.
God. Yeah, that really sucks.
And that's like a situation where like if you were in a hotel and that happened, they'd be like, oh my God, we'll get you a new room, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah,
And it was
well,
like,
one
that's
night
ridiculous.
free, like, yeah, totally.
Seriously.
Because they have
So yeah,
rules and
have you
regulations.
had any bad experiences?
No, ma'am. I've like only had good experiences. The only time I had a semi-bad experience is when I accidentally broke a chair, and it was within. I was a guest, and I broke a chair, and it was within 30 seconds of entering the Airbnb. I like sat down on a wicker chair, and it just tore in the middle. And I messaged the host. Yeah, I messaged the host right away. I was like, I'm so sorry. I'm like not a very large person. Like, I don't know why this chair would have broken. And they're like, oh, it was on its last legs anyway, so it's not your fault.
Oh,
and
that's nice.
They were just like super chill about it. So yeah, I've only had good experiences.
Well,
okay.
You're blessed.
Thank you. We're all blessed. We're blessed that Bella's here. We're blessed for this segment. That's going to do it for today's Brew's Tweets. By the way, to our listeners, feel free to submit recommendations for a new name for this segment, because we don't particularly like Brew's Tweets. So hit us up. Okay, bye, Bella.
Bye. Thanks for having me.
Business casual.
If you like what you saw and you like what you heard, you can listen to the entire episode of this podcast, Business Casual, anywhere you get your podcasts. And please go ahead and subscribe to the Morning Brew YouTube channel, and go ahead and click on that alarm bell, that thing right there, so you can be alerted anytime there's a new video.